Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Eva and we continue with our English grammar lessons. Some of you in the comment section asked me to create a video about punctuation. And finally, here it is. Today we'll start talking about punctuation in the English language. I hope there will be several videos on this channel dedicated to different groups of punctuation marks, and today we'll start with the first group, which is the punctuation marks that help us end a sentence. The first thing we should discuss is what punctuation is. Under the word punctuation, we should understand different marks, such as commas, periods, colons, and other, that are used to separate sentences and their parts in written texts. When we speak, we use intonation, and our intonation helps us express our thoughts in a clear way. But when somebody reads a text, there is no place for intonation. No intonation is involved. No intonation helps us to express this or that sentence or this or that idea correctly. And this is where we need punctuation. So punctuation is used to make the meaning of written language clear and unambiguous. Let's compare this to sentences. Wait, did you just say, "I'm moving to Texas"? Or was I imagining it? And this one, wait, did she just say I'm moving to Texas, or was I imagining it? You see that the thoughts in the first sentence are much more clear than in the sentence that doesn't have any punctuation apart from the question mark. If a sentence is well planned, it requires minimum punctuation. So actually, the more skilled you are in forming your thoughts, the less punctuation your sentences require. Punctuation also helps us express emotion in written language. With the help of punctuation, we can highlight particular words or phrases and draw our readers' attention to important elements, as well as evoke feelings. Let's see. Excuse me, sir, but given the circumstances, don't you think it's a bit excessive? Wait, you did what? If only I had known then what I know now. If only you had told me the truth. In the first sentence, the ellipsis after the word bit shows us frustration, doubt, yeah? You think it's a bit excessive, yeah? The same is in the second sentence. Wait, the person is clearly being frustrated, yeah? Or maybe even shocked by what she or he has just heard. You did what? And here we have both the question mark and the exclamation point that help us express that emotional reaction in a conversation. In the last sentence, if only you had told me the truth, the exclamation point helps us express anger or even despair, right? Okay, as I have already mentioned, well-planned word order requires a minimum of punctuation. The idea that we should keep in mind when we use punctuation in our sentences is the following. If the punctuation that we want to use does not clarify the meaning of the sentence, we don't need it. It should be omitted. Thus, the only purpose of punctuation is to make your written ideas clear. Now let's compare two couples of sentences. So, I went to the store, which by the way was so crowded, and then, oh, I saw this guy, you know, the one from, wait, where do I know him from again? That's a very expressive piece of writing, so let's see what we can do with it to avoid this excessive use of punctuation. We definitely can express the same idea in a clearer way. So we can say, I went to the store and it was so crowded. While I was there, I saw a guy I recognized, but I couldn't remember where I knew him from. You see, these sentences now have much less punctuation and the ideas are very clear. Why? Because the sentences are expressed in a better way, with better choice of words and less emotion. Let's take a look at a different example. I was going to call you, but then, well, you know, I got busy, so busy, and now, it's just too late, right? Again, that's a very emotional sentence, and let's see what we can do with it. We can say, I was going to call you, but I got really busy and lost track of time. Now it feels like it's too late, right? So, the better your sentence is formed, the less punctuation you need. Now finally, let's get down to the punctuation marks that we have in English. So what punctuation marks do we have in English? Let's start with the definition. What is a punctuation mark? A punctuation mark is a mark that is used in writing to separate sentences in their parts and to make their meaning clear. The punctuation marks that we have in English are the following: the period, the question mark, the exclamation point, the ellipsis, the comma, the colon, the semicolon, the dash, the hyphen, the brackets, the parenthesis, the apostrophe, the quotation mark, and the slash. In these and in the following videos, we are going to discuss each of these punctuation marks in detail. And today we'll start with one group of punctuation marks, which are punctuation marks that end a sentence. And the first punctuation mark here will be the period. The main function of the period is to end a sentence. Please remember that there can be no sentence that doesn't end in a punctuation mark. That can be either a period or a question mark or an exclamation point, but there should be something in the end of each sentence. And the period is the most common way to end a sentence. So first and foremost, we use the period after a declarative or imperative sentence that is not exclamatory. Please remember that there are imperative sentences that are exclamatory and those that are not. In this video, I talk about different types of sentences, so probably it will be interesting for you to watch or rewatch it if you have already watched it before proceeding with this video. So let's look at some examples. The office doesn't work on Sundays. Period. This is a declarative sentence and the period ends it. Raccoons live in trees. The same. Don't make fun of your sister. This last sentence is an imperative sentence, but it's not an exclamation. That's why it doesn't end with an exclamation point. We use a period here. Don't make fun of your sister. Period. The period is also called full stop. You can use whichever name you like. Then, we also use a period after an indirect question or after a question that is a suggestion and that does not require an answer. For instance, tell me what your phone number is, or please explain how it works, or may we hear from you soon. So when we speak about sentences, the only function of the period is to end them. But the period is also used in some other places when it has a different function. Let's see. We also use the period in place of closing parentheses after a letter or a number that denotes a series. For instance, what was the last creature in Pandora's box? A. Sorrow, B. Greed, C. Vice, and D. Hope. After each of these letters, A, B, C, D, we have a period. In English, the period is also used to separate whole numbers from decimals in a single numerical expression. We read this period as point. So, for instance, we say 15.5 inches, $2.25, or $2.25, 0.07%. The period is also used after many abbreviations. In all of these abbreviations, we don't read the word period, of course. It's just there to shorten the word. For instance, Co means company, Inc means incorporated, Fig stands for figure, PhD stands for Doctor of Philosophy, PM, AM stand for post-meridium and ante-meridium correspondingly, MRS stands for mistress and MR stands for Mr. Now we should also mention those cases in which some of you would like to use the period, but it should not be used there. The period is not used after lines in title pages, center, side and running heads, box heads of tables. For instance, the impact of climate change on marine ecosystems. This is the title of a title page of some paper, right? And there shouldn't be any periods. Another example would be quantum mechanics, an introduction to the fundamentals. The same, no period is used in a title on a title page. This one, social media and teen mental health. This is an example of a running head. What is a running head? Running heads are typically short. All letters are capital letters. They don't have any punctuation marks, periods included. The last example here would be a table. Look at it, please. The words product, price, quantity, and total sales. They are all box heads and there are no periods there. Now, the period is not used after a quotation mark that is preceded by a period. So if we already have a period within the quotation marks, there is no period after the quotation marks. Let's see. She said, "It's time to leave." The period is within the quotation marks. It would be incorrect to put a second period after the closing quotation mark. Now, we don't use the period after letters that are used as names without specific designation. Let me explain what I mean and illustrate it with examples. The witness, known only as Q, refused to speak. It's not an abbreviation. We do not shorten his or her name. It's just the letter that stands for this person. Another example, everyone knew that A was the leader of the group. It's not a contraction of a name like Andrew or Alex, it's just A. And Mrs. A told Mrs. B that Daisy got married, the same. But if we really want to contract somebody's name, we do use the period. For instance, Mrs. C for Mrs. Collins. Let's order something. Mrs. D for Mrs. Davis. Good idea, I'd like a cappuccino. What about you? Mrs. C. I'll have a tea and a muffin. Mrs. D. Nice. Let's find a table. So the names of these two ladies that take part in the conversation, in a dialogue, were mentioned at the beginning of the dialogue. And then they were contracted. C for Mrs. Collins and D for Mrs. Davis. In such cases, the period is obligatory. Another punctuation mark that is used to end a sentence is the question mark. As the name of this mark suggests, it is used to show direct inquiry, even when the sentence is not structured as a question. Let's see. Did you go to the exhibition yesterday? You did what? Have you ever been there? She asked. Who asked? What for? Can you tell this to your parents, or to your friends, or to anyone you trust? Please look at the fourth example. Who asked what for? Pay attention that there is a single question mark in this example. We do not put a second question mark after the closing quotes. We also use the question mark to express doubt. In this case, we enclose the question mark in parentheses. The witness said the robber was wearing a brown jacket. 10 books were stolen from the library. Put in a question mark in parentheses just after the word. The author wants to show us that he or she is not quite sure about the information that he or she presents in the sentence. Yeah, maybe we should check whether the jacket was brown or of any other color, whether there were 10 books or 11, and so on. Please note also that there is no space before the parentheses that contain the question mark. So it's not my omission. It is done intentionally. The word that you have doubts about is followed by the parentheses with a question mark, and there is no space between them. The next punctuation mark that can end a sentence is the exclamation point. The exclamation point is used to mark surprise, incredulity, admiration, and other strong emotions. You made a mistake. What a wonderful view. Mayday. These are all exclamations. Now, the exclamation point is also used when we directly address someone or something. We say, Jane, Mr. Anderson, hey you, Almighty God, my love. These are all sentences that address somebody directly. Please also know that we should distinguish between O and O. Compare the sentences. Oh dear God, and oh dear, there is so many things I have to tell you. Oh, but that's not what I meant. We use O without the letter H when we address somebody. And OH is just an exclamation. Another punctuation mark that we can use to end a sentence is the ellipsis. The ellipsis is 3 dots or 3 asterisks separated by n space. N space is a half of the space that is used in these or that font that you use. Ellipses can be used at the beginning or at the end of a sentence, as well as in two or more consecutive sentences. Here we should distinguish two types of ellipses, the period ellipsis and the asterisk ellipsis. The first one, the period ellipsis, is far more common. Examples: James was crestfallen and afraid. Alice, what are you up tonight? James, it depends. Rome wasn't built in a day. So what is the main function of the ellipsis? Ellipsis shows us that a part of somebody's statement has been cut from their direct quote. We often use ellipsis when we want to quote somebody, but we only need a part of their quote. For instance, the quote is long, it is almost a paragraph or a whole paragraph, and we don't need all that text, we need only a couple of sentences or a part of a sentence for our purpose. In this case, we will use ellipses to replace those parts of the text that we will throw out. This is what we see in the third example. Rome wasn't built in a day. It's not the full quote of John Haywood. His full idea was Rome wasn't built in a day, but it burned in one. Let's look at some other examples where we can see ellipses in this function. This is an excerpt from the book Budapest 1900s, a historical portrait of a city and its culture by John Lukács. We see the text, and when we start a quote here, I confess he wrote in his account in the 19th century that no city in the world holds or interests me less than Vienna. And then we see the ellipsis. Yeah, it stands for a sentence or a couple of sentences that the author threw away from the original quote that he used. Then he continues, it is, let me say, as a town merely one of a dozen. And we have another ellipsis that stands for a different part that was dropped. I showed my son who was with me, blah blah blah. He continues the quote and there are no more ellipses, which means that further he does not drop any pieces of the quote that he uses. Let's look also at this example. Here the asterisk ellipsis is used. This is an example taken from Style Manual, an official guide to the form and style of federal government publications of the United States, and the ellipses here are used with the same purpose. Now, speaking about asterisks, you might also see a line of asterisks. A line of asterisks marks an omission of an entire paragraph or of several paragraphs. Pay attention that in this case no quotation marks are used, even when this ellipsis line ends a quotation. And the last thing I would like to say about asterisks is their main purpose is a little bit different. Where do we mostly see them? We mostly see them when they indicate a footnote. Look at this example, please. Here the asterisk is used to mark this footnote. Its noon hour was literally that, yada yada. And here we finish with our punctuation marks that end a sentence. In the next lesson, we'll be speaking about other punctuation marks, particularly about those which help us divide our sentences into parts. Stay tuned, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and see you in the next video.